So before we actually get into the webinar, I would like to thank all of you, both the Indian and the European participants, for being taking time out of your busy schedule and being part of this 1 hour of program. We keep it as open as possible, and we will have a certain ground rules which we need to follow, in the sense that we will have a QA session which is going to be for last 15 minutes. From now, so then you could actually have questions raised to either to me or to my guest speaker, who is going to be introduced shortly, and you could actually do that by raising the lines are muted at this point of time, but then it will be unmuted for the last 15 minutes for the QA session. So we could actually you could raise your hands and put in your question, or you could also type in your question, which we would read out and try to answer. So we'll have it more of an interactive session, and this could be interesting for sure at the end of the webinar. So before we actually get into the whole information, I would like to introduce ourselves. So you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, it's Geeta Swamilinga, it's myself. Geeta, who is the biotech sector specialist for EBTC, and you could see on the right-hand side our guest speaker, Mr. Naveen Kulkarni, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Polyclone Bioservices Pvt. So before actually getting into this slide, I would just like to give an information about Naveen's background. Naveen is actually in charge of the Polyclone Science and Strategy, and he comes with 18 years of science and entrepreneurial experience in drug discovery industry across USA, Europe, Australia, and India. So prior to finding Polyclone, he served as the Director for Business Development at Philips Research, where he was associated with a portfolio of opportunities for new businesses, especially which are focus on healthcare and energy. And I think in his previous role, he has risen through the ranks from being a bench worker at an Australian research institute to heading the strategy business unit in the American drug discovery informatics company. So I think his vast experience speaks a lot about himself, and he's also been a public speaker and presenter in several national and international conferences. And he's mostly educated abroad. Mostly he spent his higher studies, including his research in Australia, Brisbane. So I would like to thank Naveen for being part of this webinar. So the way we are actually going to see the webinar is about a few minutes I'm going to spend on talking about EBTC, and I'll be giving you an overview or a glance on biotechnology in India. And one of the important events which is going to come up in the exactly next a month from now, which is the virtual meeting, the biopharmaceutical synergies between India and EU. I'll be giving you more information on that, and how this event is related to the present topic, which Naveen is going to talk on shifting trends in biopharmaceutical industries and opportunities in India. And finally, we'll just have highlights of EBTC's past event in the biotech sector, and also some few success stories to share with you. About us, we are this unique program called European Business and Technology Center, an EU program which is actually meant for enabling EU technologies, specifically the biotechnology and the clean tech part of the sectors of biotechnology, energy, environment, and transport. We have 4 offices in India: the Delhi office, which is the headquarter office in India, and then we have an office in South, which is based in Bangalore, and we have an office both in West and East by Kolkata and Mumbai region. So we are in some sense we are pan-Indian, and we are represented in Europe through Eurochamber. EBTC has around 39 partners across EU and India. So we work very closely with EU entities and the Indian networkers and associations and government organizations, private companies, so on and so forth. And last but not the least, EBTC is the nodal point for the Enterprise Europe network in India, so which makes our connectivity more stronger, and the opportunities inflow is more in terms of on the sector wise. The way we work, I would not spend much time on this because this information you can find it on our website. But then it's very important that these are the three pillars on which we work: the intelligence, the services, and the advocacy, the policy advocacy. See, these are the three pillars which forms the services for EBTC, and the beneficiaries are going to be the SMEs. It could be the European or the Indian SMEs, researchers, or the clusters. The European clusters, the Indian clusters, and the policymakers. So I would urge to take a time off and visit our website to get more information on the service portfolio, what we offer in terms of intelligence and policy advocacy, and overall as a customized services as well. So before just getting into the main topic, I would just like to spend a few minutes on the overview on the biotechnology in India. So Indian biotechnology is, considered as the top 12 biotechnology destination in the world, and if you consider it's the second largest biotech market in Asia after the China, with having the largest producer for vaccines in the world. We have major contributors to the WHO and UNICEF coming from the Indian company side, which makes them unique on their stand in the global front. And the biotech sector is expected to achieve a revenue of around 8.5 billion euro by 2017 with a CAGR of 22%. So which seems to be very interesting in terms of the revenue. And the key drivers which includes is, there is a strong domestic demand for the biotech products, and there is also innovation coming in through with contract services which focuses on research and development initiatives, and strong government support for the sector, which has to be told for sure. Some of the major milestones in the biotechnology field is what you're going to see here. This is a pretty crowded slide, but then I would say that this is a sunrise sector for sure. If you see, the first Indian company which was formed was early in 1978, and we see a chronological existence and establishment of various kinds of private sectors, research institutes, and some of the government contributions and the government funding body formed all throughout until 2012. You see that there is a DBT initiative to nurture the PPP model, which is under the specific program called Biotechnology Industry Research Assistance Council. So on and so forth. I think there are interesting steps that have been taken up, and with recent election, the government seems to be more pro biotech, and we see that there's a lot of opportunities opening up in the Indian market in terms of biotechnology businesses. So if you look at the landscape of Indian biotechnology, one has to look at this. The diagram is that the major chunk comes from the biopharma, which is around 64%, followed by bioservices, bioagri, bioindustrial, and bioinformatics. And this could be one of the reasons for us to focus on the biopharmaceutical segment, which I think Naveen is going to stress more in detail in another few minutes. So I would not dwell into this opportunities, but then I think I will leave the biopharmaceutical opportunities for Naveen to speak up. But then having said that, we have several other sub-sectors of biotechnology which are very interesting. Among them are the bioservices, which are a global cost challenge and the Indian advantage with having a good R&D ecosystem, which is very ideal for outsourcing kind of a projects. Especially under the nomenclature, what we call as the clinical research organization, CROs, or the clinical manufacturing organizations, or CMOs. And we also have a bioagricultural part, which is majorly into the genetically modified crops. Some of it which could not be interesting for Europe, but then the biofertilizers and biofuels and biopesticides could be one of the opportunities which Europe can look into. Bioindustrial is again very export driven, and there are several homegrown and multinational companies who are doing really good in bioindustrial aspect of the sector. And again, with the bioinformatics, India has already shown its supremacy in IT sector. So, with this emerging technology, which is interdisciplinary, I'm sure bioinformatics is going to add on to a lot of application, and this also will give a global recognition for Indian opportunities, and I'm sure EU also is going to find a better placement in bio-IT sector as well. So with this small information, I would like to actually draw your attention on this a very important event, which is the virtual meeting, which is focused on the biopharmaceutical synergies between India and Europe. This is going to happen on a very dedicated date from 29th to 31st of October 2014, and it's been co-organized by EBTC and the Council for European Union Chamber and of Commerce in India, and EB Meeting, which is a Berlin-based company who are helping us to recruit EU companies. So EU companies and EU clusters and EU SMEs who want to be a part of this could actually get connected through all of us. Why is the virtual meeting important? This is an online B2B meeting which is going to happen, and this is going to be ideal for both Indian and European organizations. And I think if you look at why do you want to participate, I'm sure this is going to save a lot of time. It doesn't involve much of your time to travel to India, especially for the EU participants. So all they have to do is get into the website, something similar to the bio-partnering session which happens through the Bio-Europe, and you get to register to the event and fill in your details and description about the kind of collaboration you're looking at, and then meet your individual Indian partners, have a pre-scheduled meetings dedicated on these days. Of course, it comes with some costings which you can actually get information on the website. So here, this is just giving you a helping hand on how the registration process is going to happen. You can actually click this active link. I think this presentation will be shared soon after the webinar, so you can actually use this link and try to register through this process and make use of this particular event, which is going to be useful for both European and Indian participants. So I think with this, I will leave the floor to Naveen, and Naveen is going to take care of the biopharmaceutical opportunities, and he's going to give an overview. Naveen.
Thank you, Geeta. Good afternoon, friends, colleagues from India, and then good morning to those who are from the UK and the rest of the Europe. I think with the background that Geeta has given about the trends in biotechnology and already some information about the biopharmaceutical industry, the stage is set for us to take this on to the next level. And what I'll be talking about, as Geeta has already mentioned, that I will give a brief overview of Indian biopharmaceutical industry, the kind of trends from a business side of it, and what is the outlook that we see, and then what are the opportunities and how these trends are now shifting due to whatever economic changes that are happening both locally as well as globally. And one of the major aspects of doing business in India, and what is our understanding, especially somebody coming from Europe, I still get questions asked if snake charmers on the street or elephants walk on the streets. No, but that is something that we need to understand better and then see what it is that we can get out of this. At the end of my presentation, I'll be giving a brief overview of Polyclone, what we do, and one of the major areas that we focus, that is protein or enzyme engineering. As Geeta has already mentioned, I think the biotech industry and the market, it is significant in terms of both local as well as the export market. And as you see, the major part of this revenue is primarily from the export activity that are carried out by businesses. And what is interesting to see is that close to 15% or even lesser is the accounted number of this total revenue from the local market, which means the selling activity in India is yet to reach there. Looking at the kind of population, it has now attracted a lot of multinational companies investing either by acquisition or partnering. And even in the last 5 years, the kind of acquisitions that we've seen, companies like Sanofi acquiring local companies, and even companies like Wyeth, which is now Pfizer, being present in India, and then having some serious business going on in Indian pharmaceutical industry is a significant mark. But again, the interesting part of this whole market dynamics is still the major part of the revenue is from the vaccines. And India being one of the largest suppliers for UNICEF, vaccines all over the country go from India. And in terms of the toppers of this overall industry is still the vaccine company, but that trend is now changing with Biocon taking the second place and then moving on to become the leader in the rest of the biopharmaceutical products. So what we see in terms of overall number of companies in India are still hovering around 100 to 120, about 120 companies approximately, and then still 60% of total market is controlled by the top 20 companies. And there is also a lot of combination between homegrown companies, and again, the story behind that is what we've seen the central government supporting a lot of vaccine development. India being one of the early, I would say, a high number of vaccine consumer, with the help of WHO, UNICEF, there has been a lot of activity in terms of vaccine development, and then there has been a lot of support by the government itself in the last about 15 to 20 years to develop vaccines, and that has given rise to the top selling biopharmaceutical product, mainly vaccines. And now the trends are changing. What we see, about 10 years ago, we had about 15 drugs with approximately 50 brands. Today we see more than 20 drugs and we see more than 250 brands. And out of that, again, we see that the biggest number is erythropoietin and gonadotropin, that is running with approximately close to 50 brands. And insulin is still an attractive market, and insulin still leads in terms of the value of sales close to about $250 million. And that's the local market that we're talking about. And there are other products like streptokinase is still a big brand, and in terms of number of brands, we are talking close to 40 brands, looking at a big chunk of approximately $50 to $60 million a year. And then there are other smaller ones like heparin, interferon, and then still GCSF is again something that's coming up as a trend that's picking up in India. And in fact, what we've seen is companies like Hafkin and Serum Institute, again talking about vaccines, they have been growing at an astonishing rate of 100% year-on-year growth. That's also because the increase in vaccine consumption both locally as well as global, with support the trends that have been happening in different kinds of outbreak like H1N1, bird flu, chikungunya, and so many other viral endemics that have been spreading in India as well as worldwide. So once we look at these trends and what it is that is attractive, or how is this whole industry attractive? I mean, we need to consider both the angles. One being from a local player point of view, why would a local company want to get into biopharmaceutical, and then why would overseas company or a multinational company would want to look at India? Both have different perspectives. Now, in terms of the Indian context, looking at an Indian entrepreneur or Indian companies, what they see here is, unlike generics, the barriers to entry are definitely not inconsiderable. I would say they are critical, which means that it is not easy for the rest of them to enter as easily as someone with the required skills or the input costs that they can manage. And the other important factor is the market. Interestingly, as we have seen, there is a big increase in global market as well as the changing trend of consumption within India as well, with almost 43% of the drug budget in the US is consumed by 6 biologic drugs, and that itself is an interesting opportunity for any Indian company to consider to get into this. So with this kind of export market, talking about overall close to $3 billion of export market that's already present, with growing needs of newer biosimilars that is as well coming up, it is definitely an interesting opportunity for an Indian company to get into. Now, the other thing is the regulatory system and the scenario in India is changing. We did have different regulatory framework, but with the biosimilars coming in, the vaccine, there is a need to look at the recombinant protein that is being produced, and some of the market leaders within India pushing for a more open regulatory framework. India has pretty much now adopted or in the process of completely adopting similar to the US FDA standards in terms of the regulatory system. We did have our initial hiccups, I would say, around early 2000s, forming various committees like GEAC, Genetic Engineering Approval Committee, and RCGM, Recombinant Products Management Committee, and so on. With these committees, again, now evolving, and more people with sound knowledge of these regulatory bodies outside of India, specifically US and some parts of Europe as well, coming in, has given a lot of inputs in terms of how we can improve this and make it better. Now, the other opportunity is that even with the attraction of local markets, we've seen that there is an opportunity for the M&A for the global companies coming into India, as well as the licensing and distribution revenues. So this is something that initially that would give an edge, but predominantly the trend now is about the off-patent, the products falling out of the patent cliff and being able to look at competitor companies to get into the established markets. And again, the major reason being the cost and also the growing local market. The deterrents are definitely the input costs, which in India is a challenge because it's not just cost, but there's also the other cultural barriers which I will touch upon in my next slide. And then the technology and skill requirement. So this again, the typical mindset of pharmaceutical or generic is not pretty much applicable here because there is a need for high-end skills and technology as well. And then there is also the challenge of the government intervention because of the evolving regulatory system. There are many things that even smaller companies as well as bigger companies face. One of the examples is that what we had as the drug controller, DCGI, Drug Controller General of India. So major inspectors who inspect the facilities are typically a pharmaceutical graduate. And we are today talking about cell culture, stem cells, and different technology and a different domain altogether, and the understanding of that is hardly there. And that is a big challenge that many companies face if they don't have a proper local partner. Then the last, which is also critical, and as Indians we hope that to change, is the infrastructure. So there is, in terms of availability for setup, there is always sufficient resources. But one of the major challenges is the infrastructure, both in terms of power, connectivity, and even, I mean, today, as we are doing this webinar, what we look at is definitely a major internet connectivity, which is still not an easy thing to access as compared to many other developed countries. As Geeta mentioned prior to me beginning this, definitely there is a change in governments, and we are already seeing that the outlook on foreign policy is expected to have a positive impact on the industry. And I do hope that we start looking at other markets apart from the US and expand our horizons based on the learnings that we have already had by dealing with the countries in and around the USA. So talking about USA, again, there is already a challenge, which I would say that as an important message, especially considering today's platform of EBTC, that USA is considering a proposal for 12-year data exclusivity. And we, from India, are definitely looking at other markets. And already there have been a few attempts or have been a few acquisitions on the European companies, Indian companies acquiring European companies. But these are still not big or have had any major significant impact yet. And the projection, what we hear on almost 30% of compounded annual growth rate of this allied market, this is outside of the US. Again, most of these considerations are based on exports of vaccines, more so towards Africa and the rest of the countries, even Latin America as well. And but then what we see now is the major global players. We are talking about GSK, and we've seen Sanofi, Aventis, and a few other major biopharmaceutical companies looking at a stronger footprint in India. Again, both through M&A, and we have seen some interesting collaborations as well that has happened. And the challenge of the skill and technology is also reducing quite fast. And that is, I would say, the biggest contributor for the shift that is happening in the trend, that we were looking at only biosimilars, but can we also start looking at something new? And some of the new vaccines that we have, like H1N1 and Panacea coming up with pentavalent vaccine, these are some of the new things that have come in at a global scale as well. The other thing is the increase of foreign direct investment. We are seeing that, again, referring to the change of governance that is happening. We do see that as an important shift, because that gives an opportunity for both in terms of infrastructure development as well as and technology, both importing as well as exchange of technology that is already happening in India. Now, the other important shift that has happened, at least in the last 7 to 8 years, is that the government funding supporting the alliance between private and research institutes. I'm now talking about what's happening locally. Locally, we do have a new grant going beyond what Geeta mentioned, that we had it in 2012. What we have since 2013 is another interesting grant, which is aimed to provide the needed boost in the SME, that is small and medium enterprises segment, and that is the big, that is called Biotechnology Ignition Grant. That again is an interesting thing, because that allows any university professor or already an employed scientist to take the idea out and then build a company, and an initial grant with nothing, with no facility or even any guarantee. It is being offered by the government. So that is one of the, I would say, an interesting and a good move by the government, but this is definitely going to take, in terms of innovations to happen, in terms of newer technology, both product as well as technology, is something that is the shift that's going to happen. Now, if you look at historically, India has been, or has been what it was because of the way the whole patent trend was, the whole patenting policy was within India. India had an option of patenting the process and not essentially the product, which in a way has helped India to become a leader in chemistry, which is what has led today India to become a significant player in generics. Now, the opposite is what is happening, and the shift is also being brought by the government and the initiatives that are being taken up. And this is now with the increased focus on biology as well as vaccine, again being the key, I would say, initiator of different biopharmaceutical activities. But when we look at the M&A scenario, definitely one of the major, I would say, reason for looking at India as a market is the lower cost and shorter time duration for development of new drugs. And that has been the #1 advantage and reasons for the global companies to look at the M&A activity in India. So when we start talking about culture, because that was one of the things that I have been talking to a few of my partners, is that India has a unique culture, and it's surely in my travels across China and the rest of the European countries, there is a definite way how India works which is quite different from the rest of the world. And one of the things is that India is a very hierarchical country, and if you're not probably meeting the head, as we are called here, either the managing directors or the chairman of the company, you're probably not talking to the decision maker. And from there are several such factors. And we at Polyclone have worked with a few companies where we've partnered together to provide solutions to a few local companies as well, and then that is definitely a challenge. I would say the key factor, especially in the pharmaceutical industry, is that many of them are family businesses, and these are run by family and the power rests at the top. So one of the things, again, when you start working with Indian companies, what we call as a flexibility. Flexibility is something that is seen in India, which also means that many times a situation in the family, or even I'm talking about a death or a birthday in the family, could be much more bigger than the deal that they're about to sign. And that is something that's quite different from many other countries. Similarly, there are always different aspects of this, which probably we can again take it up as Geeta is proposing many new initiatives on our interactions. And I would definitely leave the point that establishing and maintaining a strong relationship with a local Indian associate, that could be a fundamental key to success. And we do have one such announcement that probably Geeta will make by the end of this, which we are happy to share as well as Polyclone. Coming back to a little bit about the background of Polyclone, we have been a boutique biotech company, and we started off with a combination of both in silico and in vitro capabilities, looking at different aspects of genomics, mainly focused on nucleic acid studies, and then we moved on to looking at cell and molecular biology. Somewhere in between we found a niche, and that niche, as you see on the slide, is EEF, what we call as Enzyme Engineering Framework. Now, my reference to clean and green healthcare when I started this was in consideration with what we do with pharmaceutical company who are in the process of moving from chemical synthesis to a biotransformation. I will just talk in one slide about what we do. We call this protein or enzyme engineering framework. And this framework is used to engineer enzymes to attain activity on novel substrates or at increased thermal capabilities, or even to increase its activity, even reduce it during pH denaturation. And as well as we've had challenges where we have attained activity against a new synthetic substrate, and even different challenges in terms of looking at a different combination of product formation as well. Now, why we have been successful is because of the way we look at a challenge that is being given to us. And we typically go on about doing this by predicting the hotspots. And these hotspots are those residues, amino acid residues, which are critical in the catalytic binding of the substrate with the enzyme. And these hotspots are predicted both in the catalytic site, and with our experience we have now can confirm that there are residues which are completely outside of the catalytic site, and they can have a lot of influence on the active site. So we have a technology which is developed based on grid-based energy landscape, and it also allows us to understand the impact on inter and intra-domain, and we do what we call as per residue energy profiling. And we conduct in silico experiments to predict hotspots, and then we also run different assay conditions like having different solvents, pH, temperature, and so on. What we do is we screen for mutations. I will not go through the details of this. We could have much more interactions as during probably Q&A. What we do basically is the intra and intermolecular energy based filter, which is transformed into scoring function. And we calculate the both empirical and knowledge based screening, as well as we look at the flexibility of the structure of enzyme and substrate. And what we pride upon is that we never miss a potential modification of a residue in a given enzyme. Now, just a quick glance of how we go about doing this is we get the wild type enzyme structure, and that is the input for the whole process of this framework. And we would also require the enzyme substrate catalytic binding mode. The reason we need this catalytic binding mode is because we create an assay which will allow us to look at the path of the substrate entering the catalytic site. And we create the molecular dynamics and generate and model more than 200,000 enzyme modifications. And then we have the intra and intermolecular energy-based filters, which we call as transform scoring functions. Then we look at different substrates, and these substrates could be other proteins, DNA, or even small molecules. And we have developed a 4-dimensional QSAR filter to predict the KCAT, KM, and other parameters of the modification calculations. Finally, the key aspect of the differentiator of this is that we do the sampling of the transition, the path with which the substrate enters into the catalytic binding, and we have the QM, quantum mechanics and molecular modeling and steered molecular dynamics at specific conditions of the assay like pH and temperature. And then we predict the catalytic and physical properties of all these modifications. And finally, we are able to understand the rate limiting steps with the residues that are critical and have an impact on the final enzyme structure that we determine. So by the end of it, the output of this whole experiment would be the top 20 or 30 molecules that we feel are at the level of the required modification that is done, and then with the required activity that it can create. So that is the today core of what Polyclone does, and we also work with companies who have the biotransformation and who look at transforming from synthetic chemistry to biotransformation. And as we are looking at, we also see that the biopharmaceutical industry is one of such opportunities for us, and we hope to have some good breakthroughs in this as we go on. So with this, I would like to thank EBTC for giving me this opportunity to interact with my colleagues in the Europe and India. I'll be happy to take any questions that are relevant, and for those which we cannot, we could probably answer over email and then take it forward. And I'd like to hand over to Geeta to take this forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Naveen. Yeah, just a few seconds between the QA session and talking to us. Just wanted to conclude this webinar in terms of information as just to give you a few of the success stories, what has been happening in the EBTC at the biotech front. And if you could look at the slide, we are trying to give you information about how we work with pan-European delegations. This is in the month of November 2012, the biotech mission which happened in Bangalore. There were around 40 Indian companies and around 10 European companies, majorly from UK, Germany, Estonia, and Italy. And this was one of the interesting aspect for EBTC, because there were around very successful B2Bs that were conducted with more than 60 Indian participants, and there were 2 MOUs which were signed on the basis of joint research collaborations between the Estonia-based organization and the Indian-based organization. And this is a measure of success for EBTC in terms of biotechnology delegation, which was in the pan-European sense. EBTC, as I said, also works with consortiums and clusters. And last year we led a delegation called Feeding the Planet, which was actually the biggest European bio-food cluster, which comprised of Lombardy region from Italy, Parco Tecnologico Padano from Italy, Agropolis International from France, and the Netherlands Food Valley. So they actually came for a week and had a multiple city touring between Chandigarh, Delhi, Nasik, and Mumbai. and we really have to thank the Punjab State Council for Science and Technology in terms of organizing events for us in Chandigarh. And there were many Indian stakeholders who actually contributed, including NASIC, for instance, the NEMA organization, which enabled from the Indian side to happen this kind of a delegation. And as a result, there were 2 state-level MOUs that were signed between the cluster and as well as the Indian state governments between Punjab and Maharashtra. And there were 3 collaborations which were initiated in the sense of exploring for the research opportunities for the joint research calls. EBTC also would like to, share or stand by the research front of the STI, like the science, technology, and innovation part of pillar as well. Not only from the business aspect, from the research aspect. Last year we had this interesting participation, especially on the technology facilitation in Paris. So we had 2 Indian companies who came along with us, showcased their technology at the technology facilitation session, and we also had 2 European technologies which were introduced, and as a result we are now working closely with those European technologies to be introduced in Indian market, which we feel is adaptable and it's doable. And this is again in the pipeline as a result of this particular session which happened in Paris. Another interesting session which I want to bring to your kind attention is that we also work on a customized basis on a particular European cluster or particular European country. For instance, in this case, this was from Catalonia, which was last year when this happened in Bangalore. The Catalan delegation was headed by the President of Government of Catalonia, Mr. Arthur Mas, and there were 7 companies from Catalonia representing at different levels of research and technology centers and clusters of Catalonia. And Naveen, if you would like to, Polyclone also was a part of this session, and that's the reason why Polyclone is here today to also to share their success, because I think they are just getting into a kind of an agreement with a particular company. And Naveen, I would allow you to talk about the success story.
Thank you, Geeta. I'm quite happy to also note that Jean Mir is as well present in this session today, but he's on the mute side. So probably we would have a session separately. That's what Geeta has promised me. The company Bio-pharmaceutical, which was part of this delegation, we have progressed forward, and then we have identified a few prospects, and then we have identified areas of common interest where Bio-pharmaceutical supports companies in biotransformation and helping them move from chemistry synthesis towards biological approach. And they do have quite a good panel of assays which many Indian companies are looking forward for, and we have begun some interactions with a few local companies. And what we do is applicable for those who are already established as well, where we are working towards looking at the Spanish market. They are now moved and set up completely in Barcelona now. So shortly we will announce our cooperation and then go forward together. And I would like to thank EBTC for the facilitation. Thank Jean and the team of Bio-pharmaceutical being there for us, and then looking forward for a long and fruitful cooperation.
So thank you, Naveen. Congratulations to Polyclone and Bio-pharmaceutical on this successful story. So you get to hear the real-time success story on this webinar, which is very rewarding for EBTC, and as a whole process we see that a successful collaboration happens at the end of the operation. So with this few words, I think we are also, this is another slide which I want to show that how we are locally connected, participating actively at the different parts of the states of India. And here one of the picture what you can see is international event which happened in Odisha, and our director signing an MOU with the local institutions in order to enhance our networking within India. So we as an organization are well equipped both in terms of EU connections and the Indian connections in terms of enabling biotechnological solutions to happen across the border. So with this few words, I have been speaking to many of the European counterparts, and many of the European counterparts feel that India is the destination. India has the destination for them for most of the technologies, especially on the healthcare and the biopharmaceutical opportunities. And they feel that India has a lot of potential for adopting e-healthcare, or in terms of novel drugs for tropical diseases, vaccines, novel therapeutics, as Naveen was mentioning, and even the cosmetics part of it also. So there are tremendous scopes by which you can actually look at India, and we as an organization, the only urge I would make for the European counterparts is to use our platform, use our services, use our events, use our webinars as an information for you to learn, and we are here as an overall team to work closely for your technological collaborations, as well as helping you to protect your patents, because this is a highly knowledgeable sector. So there is a process of knowing who's who, and we have a capability of looking into the regulatory policy and intellectual property rights as well, apart from the technological help hands. So with this few words, I think we will unmute the lines, and we will be ready for the questions. So there is a question from Praveen Paul. Dear Naveen, nice talk. How is this method, EFF, different or better from conventional methods like directed evolution or rational enzyme design? Naveen?
Praveen, what we do is we simulate first the catalytic binding mode, and then we actually create the in silico assay for the enzyme. As I mentioned, looking at various parameters including solvent, pH, temperature, and so on, we conduct how the path the substrate takes to enter into the catalytic site. And the data and the information that we generate in terms of different residues that are critical in binding of the enzyme or the protein to the substrate is something that is quite novel. In almost all the projects that we have worked, our customers, they have seen something completely new that probably wouldn't have been possible at all in a conventional enzyme assay. And in fact, the best thing is about the final output that we give the top 20 enzymes. And these are based on the design or desired modification with the desired let's say activity state or the increased activity at different temperature, thermodynamics, and so on. So in that sense, what we do is quite novel, and I'm very happy to take email separately. Probably Geeta will be able to share your contact details, and then we can then take it up and discuss in detail later what kind of uniqueness that we have.
So another question is from Raj Gunashekar. The question is, do you think during an M&A, R&D, innovation takes a backseat? I think this is for Naveen.
Well, that's an interesting question, Raj. With my experience of what I have seen, I will have to believe that so, yes. But again, if the reason for M&A is the innovation and either the new product or technology itself, then that is not. Then the innovation and R&D would lead the reason for the M&A. But in most cases, especially in India, it is typically the footprint that is one of the reasons for the M&A. So yes, that happens.
So if there are any questions, you could actually type in or raising your arms. Yeah. Yeah, in case if you require, we can unmute and you could directly ask the question. So there's another question which is coming up from Renu Shom. This is a question for Naveen. For Mr. Naveen, for my better understanding, kindly elaborate on the 12-year data exclusivity US proposal, its impact on Indian biotech market.
One of the reasons for growth of the Indian exports is the biosimilars. So there is the patent that drops off, and then the Indian companies are ready. We have seen some of these companies like Ranbaxy looking at these kind of products. Now the US healthcare, knowing that the critical role especially these biosimilars play, the proposal is to extend this data exclusivity, which means that if it is new and the company gets the additional 12 years for it to extend the patent or the uniqueness in the market, rather the market access. So that prevents specifically companies from outside entering into US market if they don't have the local data. So that being a challenge, Indian companies which were looking forward for entering into US market with almost, I think, about 7 products that are going off patent and entering the US market, that is probably going to get affected. So knowing that US is still the biggest market for Indian exports, this is a challenge. So one of the reasons why I saw that this presentation would be relevant is because Europe is still, rather India is opening its eyes towards European market, and this is an opportunity where we consider what could be done with Europe, or what can Europe do with Indian, both local market as well as the products that can be developed.
Yeah. So there's another question posted by Raj Gunashekar. Recently this year, AstraZeneca and Piramal shut down their R&D centers in India. What does this indicate about Indian biopharma market?
Okay. You want to pick up? You can. Well, I think the AstraZeneca shutdown was more in sync with what was happening globally, and it was not very much indicative of what was there or anything from the local market itself. Because the Indian R&D, with all the investments and infrastructure, was still looking at some of the diseases that are not really coming out for a blockbuster, neither for Indian market nor for the global market. The primary focus here was tuberculosis. So that the relevance of it would still be global. We are seeing even Merck looking at a lot of downsizing, and a few other companies as well. And big pharma companies are seeing it more profitable in M&A, what we saw recently with Sigma Aldrich getting into a new business activity. Whereas in case of Piramal, they are diversifying, and I think they have already made a lot in terms of the M&A related revenues. So because their focus is now shifting, and then they went into diagnostics, and then now they're again moving into different areas and want to focus on the core, both the finance and other allied activities that they are getting into, both on the investment side and so on. So yeah, whether that really says anything about the Indian biopharma market, I'm not sure. Definitely not AstraZeneca. And Piramal is looking at diversification. They started with diagnostics. I mean, they did do some things in diagnostics, but then sold that as well for a plump figure, I would say.
I think I agree with Naveen. Renu, do you have any question? Your line is unmuted. Yeah, I think
Geeta.
So there's a question that Renu is asking for Naveen's mail, and I would Renu, I would share his contact details. Yeah. So I think we'll take it offline. Dotted 1 minute early or something like that, which is a very positive sign. And I would thank Naveen also for giving us the information that was quite useful, and for the sense that we had got a very strategic platform to showcase our next virtual event, which is going to happen in October. So I'm sure the stakeholders from both Europe and India are going to benefit, and I'm sure they're going to be active participation on this platform, and we would look forward for your useful feedback, and do interact with us on a one-on-one basis. And thank you all. Have a great day.